Well, a very good morning on this December 13th. We are lucky to have the Reverend Dennis Reynolds with us, who gave the sermon this week titled Joy Abides. So thank you, Dennis, for coming back. It's always good to see you.
Good to be here.
And real quick, before we start, I need a show of hands of how many people are incapable of getting the Joy Abides song out of their head. Who else?
You mean the
Who
one
else?
that I'm singing right
Yeah.
now?
Who else is suffering from this affliction that Reverend Dennis has heaped upon us? I need, Dennis, I'm going to need you to do an exorcism to get that song out of my head.
Oh,
You're
no.
going to need a different kind of minister for an exorcism.
Right.
Unitarian Universalists say exorcisms is an individual responsibility.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's a good position to hold. Sharon wanted to go first.
I want to say how delighted I was to see children and the stories of children. I miss them so much.
Yeah.
Amen.
So I was really delighted to see them, to hear them, and to hear the wonderful quality of storytelling that Dennis gives us. I think that must have been one of your fortes as a preschool teacher. Did you love reading? And
Oh, it
telling
certainly
stories?
came from that. You know, my original undergraduate major was speech and then theater. And that was something that I, refined, really doing lots and lots of stories with kids multiple times a day. Yeah. And I kind of miss the congregations that have kids involved, that, the story for all ages. Where I could pull up my Leo Leone storybook, who's one of my favorite theologians and children's book writer, is Leo Leone. So,
Yeah.
no, I enjoy doing that. And you could clearly, when Martha talked to me about a, theme of joy, and this was the Advent candle of joy, the stories of that little baby who brings me such joy in my life. Which I think is definitely why that's the joy-filled story that the, Christian gospel lifts up in this season. Though we don't know if it happened like that, or most accounts are if in fact it happened, it probably didn't happen around the solstice, the winter solstice. But embracing that symbol of renewal and starting again, that I think that closing reading that I selected from Sophia Foss lifts up about each child. That's one of my favorite readings. That she was, for background, a noted, kind of creator of religious education in a different way in Unitarian circles in the 1950s in particular. We have a picture of her in our home. Suzanne got to have tea with her at an event at her Seattle church when she was a little girl.
Wow.
So Sophia Foss is a noted personage in the Unitarian side of our history.
Nice.
Yeah. When it comes to who, of course, we want to see all sorts of people in our congregation, but really, when it comes to society or culture, if we don't have children, we don't really have a society or a culture, right? Because by definition, there's no, nothing will inherit, what it is that we are putting forward. Dennis,
vitality is missing.
Yeah. Dennis, I was curious, do you make a distinction between joy and happiness? And if so, how would you?
Yeah, I think the difference for me is joy moves more deeply within. In the sense of happiness is kind of lighter, more surface. And I will riff off your thing about the soundworm of a song. Joy is like a soundworm in my heart.
Okay.
It continues to sort of echo beyond happiness.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah. I I have come to the conclusion, and it might sound a little nihilistic, and maybe you can comment on it, is that the default setting of life is one of suffering, right? That's kind of one of the Buddhist concepts of um, how we think about our existence. And so when happiness, and and I like your distinction between joy and happiness, but when happiness happens, it's that we should enjoy it, we should be grateful for it, but we should understand that it's by definition temporary.
Right. Well, and the one that I would, reflect on again, and I shared more about it, a couple of months back when I talked more about dukkha. They're both impermanent. Is part of my understanding of Buddhist teachings, and real happiness and deeper joy comes from not attaching to either one of them, not to hold, in either that happy moment or that sorrow-filled moment too tightly,
Mm.
knowing that whatever it is will fall away.
Do you
And,
do you think there is a default setting then, or is it neutral?
Well, no, I think that certainly suffering exists, difficulties exist, and that's sometimes people when they play with those retranslations of that word dukkha. Does it mean suffering? Does it mean the difficulties that arise? Is one I've heard from one of the Buddhist teachers I've spent time with. The difficulties that arise, and difficulties do arise in the cycle of life. I mean, just things like if we're a meat eater, we create difficulties for chickens and cows. And so the recognition that the hard stuff exists somewhere in the cycle, and the death exists. I mean, one of the important Buddhist stories, and maybe I don't want to go too far with this because I might want to do a sermon around it, is the story attributed to the Buddha when a woman comes to him and her child has died, and asks for her to correct the situation, asks the Buddha to correct the situation. And he says, come back to me with a mustard seed from any household that has not experienced grief and loss. Mm-hmm. And the basic thing of the story is she cannot find such a household. So it exists in our life. And I believe so does happiness and joy. And so maybe the whole deal is default. It's all going to be out there, and why I embraced and why I love that song, and so did you and my sister-in-law Peggy, Joy Abides, is because I believe it does. It's there out of sight, even in the midst of difficult times.
Well put. So who would like to go next?
Well, I can just share I find joy in just the most darn things. And I can be happy, just like bang, a little flip of the light switch, and I can get silly. And then I start singing and dancing. It drives people crazy. But anyway, I think I find joy in just these little darn things, like if you go outside and you see a little bug crawling, that's the kind of joy that I find. And I'm very emotionally touched by softness and caring. I'm the person that goes to a movie and takes a box of tissue with them. Any kind of deep feeling, I feel it too. And I don't know what that actually means, except that that's the way I'm wired. I don't need a big celebration to feel joyful.
And that's an incredible gift. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was waiting for Dennis. I didn't know if Dennis wanted to respond to that. Okay, so yeah. How about let's do Lurlee, then Laleen, and let me type it in to make sure we got it. Go ahead, Lurlee.
I guess I have joy in my heart, and why I end up telling stories of my three sons over and over and over again in their childhood. the greatest gift my husband ever gave to me was my 3 sons. And I delighted in the way they grew up. And right off the top of my head, the one story of I'm fixing dinner and Dick takes the 3 boys on a walk and they don't come back for almost an hour because they had to stop and watch a snail cross the walk. And it
Yeah.
just, you know, to me, that's just joyful and fun. So thank you, Dennis. It was, I appreciated it today.
Well, and that's what I hope, that it was also an invitation for others to recall those joys, because there is a joy in reimagining, in reconstructing and recreating. Those joys we've experienced in the past, they're still with us. You know, we can remember them and give them body, if you will, give them arms and legs when we remember.
Exactly. Even though it may mean that my 3 sons are sick and tired of all the children's stories that I tell about them.
But we'll never tire of them, literally. We will
No.
never tire to hearing them.
To be fair, none of us gave her grandchildren, so that's kind of all you got. So. Lillian wanted to talk.
Oh, that little conversation really just tipped off so many things. I never, and my brother and I never gave my mother grandchildren either. And so the 2 of us were constantly the topic of her life. But what I wanted to say to you before you made that comment was that I don't experience with you the joy that you express coming from reminiscing about the kids' childhood. What I experience with you is the love that you have today for your kids, and it kind of just like bubbles around, and then it comes out in the form of stories, because it's not too cool, you know, on a tape program like this to say, I love my son Michael so much. He has brought me so much pleasure in
Make
my
it
life.
stop.
It's so embarrassed. And I should do a whole sermon on his babyhood and childhood. It would-
I can write it for you.
Oh my God. I am going.
We all can
There's
help.
so many stories.
However, that was not what I intended to say.
I honestly, I wouldn't do that to poor Michael. I mean, it's bad enough that everybody knows about him taking the weed whacker.
Okay, you are risking getting booted now.
Okay.
All right.
I will remind you, he has the power to mute you,
Yes,
Yes.
at least in this setting, right?
that's
And
right.
he knows how to do it.
Yes.
Whereas
Please.
some people in the public side didn't know how to do it.
All right. I want to steer this back to Lillian and
I-
save
I-
this conversation.
Before we do that, Michael, I do want to comment in terms of
Yeah.
this. I think that's what Sophia Fawes was saying each time a child is born.
Yeah.
And that's true to a parent. And then she goes on to standing by the crib. From that moment, parents imagine who that child will become. You know, and so that is a piece that is there for all of us and all the children we've known.
I 100% agree. And
Our own inner child. And,
Mhm.
you know, as I describe it, it's my inner adolescent that's scarily close to the surface. You don't have to go very deep for that guy to show up again. But, you know, that's the point. There is a joy in recollection,
Mhm.
as well as a joy in anticipation. One of the drafts of the sermon had a little bit more about anticipation, which is what Advent really is all about. You know, and so I didn't get into as much as the joy that we anticipated that has yet to arrive. I mean, I'm feeling anticipatory joy about vaccinations,
Right.
or at least most of us,
Mhm.
to reduce the risks that we're all having to face when we actually get to be. I mean, I hinted at it when I said the last time we got to be together was last March,
Mhm.
and looking
Mhm.
forward to the day when we will be again.
Yes.
And that's a joy of anticipation that kindles some joy with me. Like, this too will pass.
Yes. Yes. Well, and thank you for that. That was actually something very important. Laleen, go ahead to your main point.
Um, my main point was actually kind of a continuation of what Dennis is saying, but I was reminded during your talk, Dennis, about the year-long program that we did in adult education on living your life to its end in the fullest, and covering every aspect of that. There are, I guess there's several of us here who participated. And the comment that I wanted to make that came for me from that experience was, as we moved through it and as I continued to live and experience it afterwards, what I found was I found myself living in a much deeper joy and happiness than I could say I had lived in before. Having looked over one's life from every aspect that when that program was created, I could imagine, and then experiencing that with my peers, brought with it this shared beauty of kin, not kin personship, but just, I don't know what the word would be. Maybe it's just the commonality of the experiences, but most importantly, what we were all doing with the process as we went through it. Kind of bringing our life up to a point where there was recognition, there was revelation, there was pride, there was ownership, there was a sense of a life well lived. And for me, a real anticipation and excitement about what was to come. And it has been so meaningful that I found myself sharing just this past week with a friend that that I really do live my life today, anticipating what's to come. At 79, more than I could ever have said that before, but anticipating it with a joy and eagerness of, oh, okay, what's around this corner? Or what's this person going to say and bring, into my life? Or gosh, what am I going to do tomorrow when I wake up and do my day? So I guess I'm wondering how you would comment on what you were talking about today in terms of one's life cycle, chronology of one's life and what happens as we move into the years that you're in, and then even the more elder years that some of us are in.
Boy, that's some pondering, but some initial thoughts. And I'm an external processor, so I think out loud. So, this can work for me in the way I think things through. But I'll want to do some internal one in that too. But first thing that comes to mind is this sense of eschatology in theological talk means talking about the end. And it can be the end times or contemplating the end of our own life. And, Buddhist teachings in particular, I think, really focus on when we recognize that life is finite, it can open us up to be more present in the given moment. Because we're not worried about what will happen at some point in the future. We know that it's finite and that time will come when it comes. But that's not now. Let's be present to now. Now, Christian theology talks about, life being renewed and being endless and a life after this bodily life, which offers a different kind of relief of the anxiety about it. So I think if we don't spend our life worrying about the end of life, we're more fully present to be able to live it today. And whatever that is, whether it's the joy that comes, and one I didn't put on my list of joys is every morning we have an array of bird feeders outside the window where we eat breakfast. And so joy comes fluttering in to my day every day. And I had to invest some into it a little bit for the bird feeder, and I go out and refill it. I think when we worry less about it ending, and this is a reiteration, rephrasing, we're more present to the fact that it is now. Whatever offers us that relief.
Great. Paul wanted to go next. And just a reminder, okay, and then Connie. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Well, during the sermon, I was very, very nice sermon, by the way, Dennis. I thought about a very deep and abiding joy that I've experienced. Thought I'd share it with everybody. We were living in Glen Eden Beach, on the coast. This is just south of Lincoln City, but kind of a rugged area. And my wife was pregnant with her youngest, and I was very relaxed during this whole process. She wanted to have a home birth, but we had a midwife, so I didn't worry about very much. I was usually handed books to read, which I never did. I just figured I've got an easy ride on this. But the way my wife works, we'd watch Star Trek, she'd take a bath, water breaks, baby born. And I should have known the warning signs, because that's exactly what happened that night. And she says, I think my water broke. And I said, well, I'll call the midwife. And I did. And she says, well, I'm on my way. But she never showed up. She was stuck in a construction zone. Meanwhile, my wife is pacing, saying, the baby's coming. Baby's coming. I said, well, the midwife's not here yet. So
Well,
I learned that that line didn't really work very well. So I ended up being my own midwife that night. I've never experienced childbirth from that angle. And it was a very incredible moment when my son was born, because here I am holding him in my hands. And it was just amazing. And that level of joy has never left. I still feel that same magical feeling that I felt when he was born. So that's my childhood joy story.
Pretty hard to top something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, and
I think you described one example of why each time a child is born is a holy time.
yeah, and it's also proof that the best people in the world watch Star Trek.
Yes, for various reasons.
Connie wanted to say
Disclaimer.
Well, I think all of you know that I like taking notes while I'm listening. And so looking back on those, one of the things that really caught me was a statement where you were talking about to become fully generous as an example of joy. And I love that sentence or part of a sentence. And I guess I'd like to hear you say more about that. I mean, I feel that real strongly. The other thing I wanted to say, though, is when you were filming this sermon, did you have a poinsettia tie on?
I did.
Mhm.
As I said to Michael, I said, when else am I going to wear this poinsettia tie?
That's right.
I thought that was so great. And so when I tuned into the Zoom, I was shocked that I didn't get to see that tie. I forgot that it was totally different day.
So I should pay attention to my Sunday wardrobe when I record. One of the interesting ones that I'll share as an anecdote and then follow up some comments about what you had to say was this morning, I bounced between this service, which I watched early in order to go to church in Eugene, which does Zoom live for the service. They've been recording their choir, and they've got a tech person in addition to the choir director that helps make that happen. And they record all these different people. The choir director was in the recording in 3 different frames. He was directing the choir, he was singing the tenor part, and he was playing drums. So what happens in Zoom can be quite fascinating. So and he was wearing different clothes in the different images. They were clearly recorded separately, and then they put them all together in a way that they actually fit, because I think they were all paying attention to the accompanist. To be able to keep on the same music. But the piece about joy, that David White gets credit for that. It was from his essay on joy that we shared as a reading, and then I lifted it up again in the sermon about generosity, to be fully generous. And we are feeling more joyous, we feel more generous, and when we are generous, we feel more joy. The ability to be generous is almost circular in a sense that joy feeds generosity, and generosity feeds joy. Practical one that comes to mind is reading about how congregations that chose to give their plate offering away every Sunday found that the pledges to the church went up. It's not like, because many congregations say, well, we don't want to give away the plate offering, we need the money. But in most congregations, the pledges are the bulk of the income. And when they gave it all away, it fed a spirit of joyous generosity. And so people gave more to the church as well as what they gave to the other organizations that they supported. So that, I think that there's a circular relationship between joy and generosity.
I also, am I muted?
Nope, you are
No,
live.
okay. The part about it, of being fully generous, to me, is more than giving things like giving money or giving gifts. To be a fully generous person is in a way like giving people a little slack, you know? So I really appreciated you bringing that up. The idea of joy and being fully generous.
And generosity of spirit would be another phrase.
Yeah, well, it was during my talk. One thing that I'd like to remind people of, that if you're having a disagreement with somebody, there is something called the principle of charity, right? And the principle of charity means that you're not ascribing ill intent to somebody who disagrees with you. And that is, yeah, and Connie, that is absolutely, I think, a way of giving slack and a way of being generous. So, yeah. Oh, well, JC.
Besides being charmed by linking generosity to joy, you used another word that I really love, and that's imagination. And in my shamanic studies, Christina, the shaman, keeps saying, use your imagination. What do you think you were given an imagination for? It's the only way you can think about something that isn't there yet. So it's not pretend because you're in your imagination. It's you looking at what might be. And so you gave me two really big words, generosity, and imagination, to go along with joy. And in preparing for next week, I've been dealing with the concept of your religion has a lot to do with how you come, what attitude you hold for it. Is it duty? Is it, hard work? Do these things because they're good and you're not? Or is it, I want to believe, I hold my values in joy. And because I enjoy them, that's the ones I choose to live. And that came from the learning that we did, that Lamine mentioned, about living your life fully to the moment of your death. Why waste it not looking at the joy possible? And that's part of the generosity, Connie. I'm looking over here at Connie. That's part of the generosity, is to hold the joy. So anyway, I've written down for next week and you'll hear it. I suggest we choose joy. Of all the ways you could come to something, see what being in joy makes things be for me, for you, for whatever. Anyway, I really enjoyed the gentleness of your message, but those two words are really powerful.
Thank you.
Well, we haven't heard from, there's a few people we haven't heard from. Kim, do you feel like saying anything?
Okay. I find it hard to be joyful this time of year, and because of the person I lost, and it's getting a little easier, but not really.
Mhm.
But so I was looking up information about joy from a Christian standpoint of view, and what I found out was that God gives us the joy, but by giving him his son, and so we always have joy. It's the happiness that comes and goes. And I thought, oh, okay, I can live with that. And so so God gives me the joy. So I'm going to try to be joyful and happiness when I can.
Well, and that's the power of retelling the story of the joyous birth of the Christ child year after year after year, to help
Which
us.
I just did.
Yeah.
I just did on yesterday. I
Mhm.
told the story of Jesus' birth.
Mhm. And played the music for it.
Yep.
And sang. Yeah. 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 Fantastic. Paul, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
I'm sorry. You're right. Look, I am forgetful these days. Glennis. We have not heard from Glennis.
One of the difficulties of being a little bit late is that I'm not sure what's already been touched on. But
That's
I
all
have
right.
I have two things. One of them was when you said that having to wear face masks force us to look into each other's eyes. And I thought, oh my God, you're right. And how better way to look at somebody eye to eye and send that love that actually needs to be sent. Perhaps that person's having a bad day. Maybe I'm having a bad day, but that has to be something that could be very helpful on both of our counts. The other thing is that the last song, I sang with you. I sang with that song, Joy to the World. And I have to say, it worked. It brought joy to my heart. There were places where I don't know the words, and some of the but I would, so I would, sing in harmony with that, kind of and then join in the words, all in harmony, of course, because that's what I do. But I have to say that felt so good to push the air, to send that joy out into the atmosphere, that that surely is what that song was written for. Thank you.
Mhm.
Two pieces. One, I do want to acknowledge that was Meghan Markle. I was still quoting the Duchess of Sussex about, masks forcing us,
Right.
forcing us to look each in the other's eyes. I chose to share it, so I obviously agree with it. But I think it is very true when we can catch an eye, which in our culture we often avoid that looking into each other's eye, because we're so focused on the words that emerge from the mouth. And singing the carol was absolutely, seeming like, in the holiday season, why we want to lift that up. And I find it interesting that the version that's in the UU hymnal is certainly a different version of some of the words than the ones that I learned as a child. When that hymnal was put together in the 1970s, there was a pushback against theistic language within our faith communities that we're getting away from. And I've been in UU churches where we all have the hymnal, so you don't have to remember the words, but we're invited to sing whatever version we remember, or the one in the hymnal. And as we have that choice to make. And I think it's both ways, that choice of reclaiming language of spirit and divinity, and and the language that can speak to us most deeply, rather than trying to be cautious and safe.
And that's how when we've been doing our holiday season services, that's exactly what we said, was
Yeah.
sing the version that you want. And so
Just like we learned in all way back, the
Yeah.
memories of all those former experiences of being in choirs and attending church or schools or wherever we have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that song brought a lot of joy. I'm
And,
glad we added that to the end. That was
Yeah.
important.
And the reason that the version that you hear is there is that was the Creative Commons version. So we got the children and their adorable English accents.
It was wonderful.
Yes. Let's see. Sharon.
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
Referencing the mask wearing, I've been playing a game because the first time, well, it's probably natural to anybody. When you see a child, you smile.
Mhm.
But with the mask on, I started to smile and I said, oh, the child can't see my smile.
Mhm.
And the child's face just lit up and the little eyes were squinted, smiling back at me because the child could see my eyes. And so I play this game with every child and they all get it. Even the ones that are really little, if they're sitting in a grocery cart, not
Mhm.
wearing a mask, you can smile at them and they can see your eyes are smiling.
Mhm.
And it's so refreshing in the grocery store when it looks like everything is so somber. And when you get close to somebody, they back up, trying to get out of your distance or trying to keep you out of their social distancing space. So I just wanted to add that it's really fun. If anybody wants to join me in that game, I think you'll really find some pleasure.
Yeah. How about we do Kim and unless
Yeah, I have-
Dennis, if you okay, we'll do Kim then Lois. Unless Dennis, do you have anything to say about that?
Not immediately, no. I just nod. That's when the preacher gets to say amen, sister.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I just always want to give you the chance, but you don't feel obligated. Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I just have a comment about the mask with kids.
Mhm.
I have a particular child, when I have my mask that's around my neck on, he calls me creepy because he doesn't like this. He likes to see my my face. I said, so you don't like this mask? He goes, no, I want the other one, which is a face shield. So he sees my whole face. But yeah, he was telling me on the bus, go away, you're creepy.
There
So
is
I went and put the other mask on.
there is some beginning to explore how all this may impact kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Particularly, I think of, toddlers and young preschoolers who, are, one anecdote I read once and recently in an article of a kid turning to the parents when they were out on a walk says, "Oh no, mommy, people are coming close." And
Oh,
there will be some research and exploring what does it mean for kids who have rarely seen adults without masks for at least a significant chunk of time. I shared in the sermon the piece that, COVID has been an active part of my grandson's reality his entire life. Now he has a pod of people that, he was unmasked with, but when he went out and met people, most of the people he met in the first year of his life were wearing masks.
Mhm.
So it's a different developmental experience for those who, I use the comparison, if we think of time for young children as percentage of life, I've used the description sometimes 2 minutes is not very long for me, but for a 2-year-old, that's a much longer period of time. Because it's a larger percentage of their whole lifetime. And when you think about kids who hardly can recall encountering a stranger or anything beyond their tight circle of their pod who does not wear a mask, and being encouraged even more than we have in our culture in the recent past to give strangers 6 feet of distance always.
Mhm.
We'll see how that plays out over time as they're invited back. When will we return to, unqualified hugs, and all of that will be playing out in a different kind of way.
Yeah, I share your concerns. I am worried deeply about social cohesion, um, especially these
mhm.
days. Yeah. Lois wanted to go, and then we'll have Connie.
I
Okay.
seldom have much of a comment, but I enjoy listening to everyone else's. And the whole thing is with joy. I feel such joy at the most and brings tears to my eyes to see people in reunions, happy reunions. It is just and we're all looking forward to that too, reunion, to be fully with another person. But it's, for me, the struggle is to give myself permission to relax and experience that joy in everything I do in life, because we have so much. We really do. We have so much to be thankful for. It's a spirit of contentment for me rather than extreme happiness and joy. Joy comes, that's a peak. That's the peak, and it is transient. Then comes happiness, but contentment is a feeling overall. The problem is, are we too used to our contentment? So that, I don't know. I'm still trying to work it all out. Are we too content? We have so much here. I think of Iran and the people, the women who have been going on for so many centuries, and all they have is their eye holes. Yesterday, I saw a woman who truly smiled with her eyes, and that gave me such pleasure. It just brightened my soul. And uh, joy. That's something we all search for all the time, and it is truly the peak of happiness at that moment. Um, I try to be more joyful. It's a struggle for me.
Mhm.
I don't know why. It's hard to break through that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love life though. I think we have it so good.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I certainly pray for a free Iran. So, uh, yeah. Um, Connie, did you want to say something?
Well, I have one more question for Dennis. In towards the beginning of your talk, I can't remember the context exactly, but you said something like we've lost our ability to communicate. And I think you were talking about with neighbors. And so I don't know, I might have taken that out of context, but my feeling personally is my communication skills have improved, both in telephone conversations and sending letters. Like my Christmas letter was totally different, sending cards to people. So for me, I think I've realized how important communications are. So I just, maybe I took what you said out of context.
What was in my mind, and to some extent my heart, when I wrote that, was the sense of, because of a time of increased political and social divisiveness, sometimes we fear an argument, so we're more reticent. And when we do discuss, sometimes it ramps up much more quickly. So that increases our sense of reticence. But also just, I look at the ability, literally, my next door neighbors, we moved into this house in February, and we were thinking about when would we have the open house to invite our new neighbors into our house. Well, March came and things started shutting down. And I don't know my neighbors in the same way as I would if it wasn't this year,
Mhm.
if it wasn't for that distancing of this year. And, close dear friends, who say, can I wear a mask and come see the inside of the house? And we offer that on a limited basis. But we would have had an open house. And so in many ways, it's harder to be open, I find, because of both the pandemic restrictions and the heat that exists in our social political world right now. So that's what was moving for me.
Mhm.
And you're right, there is a different kind of depth, and there are some trade-offs that come because people are writing more. I mean, there was a member of the Eugene congregation who went to the list of 300 people and sent 300 cards to everybody in the congregation and got, she said, like 50 back. That wouldn't have happened any other year. And those kinds of trade-offs, or doing this in a closer way where you can actually see everybody's face and do, because Michael's in charge, a better job of taking turns. And, or I'm part of a meditation group that's led by a teacher I worked with when we lived in the Puget Sound. He lives on Whidbey Island, teaches meditation usually to veterans at the Vest Hospital in Seattle. Well, he's not doing that in person. So he's doing a Zoom gathering every Sunday evening. We took a break for a few weeks, but he's got people from Philadelphia and Boston and a woman from Costa Rica who log in to be in Sangha together.
Mm.
So there are some trade-offs of ways we get to be together that we couldn't otherwise. Without technology, I wouldn't have those videos of my grandson that, wake me up in the morning. My phone beeps sometimes during the night and wakes me up, but I always wait till the morning to look at them because they're 9 hours difference in time zone. So their times are totally different. When we Zoom and we say goodnight, but for us, it's late morning. But without the technologies, we would be more distant in some ways. So there's certainly some trade-offs. I know many congregations, Eugene congregation is thinking about they've used far more recorded musics and little video clips like the things I'm bringing, and I've already got one in mind for January, that we wouldn't necessarily use so much. I'm a big fan of live music, so I don't hope we don't over rely on recorded things beyond this year, because I think there's a piece of being present to the musicians, with the musicians. Like I said, I was a theater major, not a film major. In both theater, in being present with you, that I miss, because there's a vibrational energy, a spiritual energy that I think fills the sanctuary when we're together in it, that I really look forward to returning to.
Yeah. And I would add that hopefully we can continue the best of what's working with technology when we are meeting in person, yeah. Lurley.
Okay, thank you. I throughout this whole pandemic and situation, I have to thank and am glad for the blessing of technology, because when the flu epidemic or the pandemic of the bubonic plague and all that, people couldn't communicate like we can today. And it's easier or better for us to be isolated, but we're not really all by ourselves. We have this technology, this Zoom, this, the telephone, and we can communicate. And just like you said, going to the grocery store and smiling at people, they may not see your mouth in a curve of a smile, but they do see the smile of your eyes, and it's returned. So I feel very blessed that this pandemic came at the time that we have these technologies. I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah.
Oh, indeed. I get another amen.
Thank you.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left. Yeah, Martha.
Well, I just want to say, I really enjoy the effort that Dennis makes on the production of his sermons. You can tell that he has that Gestalt kind of sense. It's not that he's just doing a talk. He's doing the whole thing. And I love participating with it. It gives me joy to do those things, even though I had a major screw up in the middle of a very somber moment.
You have my apologies. I looked and looked for it.
It was perfect.
Martha, I suspect sometimes it's a trade-off for you, but I know you're also working on other Sunday services where you have opportunities to select some readings and things, because I bring the whole package usually.
Yeah, and I just appreciate that. But what I do miss is us being together, all of us, the music, the instrumentals, the guitar, the piano, just
and the snack.
And the cream puffs that Lurley, but it's an experience. I just want to commend Dennis for putting together a lovely experience that is very interactive, and I do appreciate that. We try to do as best we can on other Sundays, and we do pretty good, but I often appreciate this because I really know the effort you put into it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And, and that goes back to an important lesson from my mentor minister, the Reverend Carolyn Colbert, who was the minister when I headed off to seminary here in Eugene. And Carolyn made a comment once. She said, "Oh, yeah, the sermon, that part of the surface that some people think is the most important." And when the minister says it's not necessarily the most important, it is the totality. That's a lesson that resonated for me. The noted Unitarian Universalist theologian Tendanka suggests that maybe we should preach from the music, which is something I try to do, which is this week was an example. The real reading was not the David White as much as it was that song from Kathleen Tracy, because that's what I reflected on. And that's what creates the spirit of the message, is all of that. You're absolutely right. And this is when Michael gets to say, as the music guy, gets to say amen. Right?
Yes, it's true. Amen. Sharon, and so we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll do Sharon, then Laline, and I think that will close us out. Oh.
Well, I had a comment about whatever happened in the technology. The first time you were doing the shared reading between Martha and yourself, Dennis, I could not hear you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I turned on the closed captioning. And that was funny because things were not quite exact. But the next time that Dennis, were there 2 more times that Dennis and Martha shared readings. It was very audible. So whatever was done by where you were standing or how you had your back or your face forward, or if you were closer to a mic, I hope you can make note of that, because I didn't need the closed captioning after that.
Yeah.
Working that technology, right, Michael?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yes, it's always an experience.
Yeah.
Laline, you want to try real quick?
Yeah, I got to say this, Martha. I just loved your screw up. It was marvelous.
It was hilarious.
Because the uptake from it, the way you laughed, and plus, we're all on technology now, and Michael cuts out all of our screw ups, and we're going to go live again, and there's no, cutting and splicing. So thank you for being
We talked earlier about
it reminds
that
people that
having
we will
outtakes.
in the future.
It brought joy to all of us.
Those human
Me
moments.
too. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was very joyous, may I say.
We enjoyed it.
Yes. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us. It really is a pleasure to hear your services and to hear your responses to everybody's questions and comments. So I certainly am leaving uplifted, and I hope you all are as well. I don't suppose you have any final thoughts for us?
It's my great pleasure to, be able to reflect and to hear you, especially during the time when we don't get to be in the same space. And I don't get that kind of energy that comes from, our shared presence.
Absolutely.
This feeds me as well. So thank you.
And please join us again next. Oh, Martha?
I just wanted to ask is if the committee for next week could stay on for 5 minutes so we can figure out a time that we could record this week.
Sounds good.
Could we do that?
Yeah.
There's 5 of us present.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.